Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us and welcome to Ad Age Remotely. I'm Janine Poggi, Senior Editor here at Ad Age, and today I'm joined live by Stephen Tisdale, Chief Marketing Officer at State Street Global Advisors. Hi, Stephen.
Hey, hello.
How are you?
I'm doing good.
Thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's a privilege to be here.
For those of you watching at home, before we begin, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them on our social channels. We'll try to get to them during this conversation. So State Street is perhaps best known for its Fearless Girl statue, which was erected on Wall Street in 2017 to draw awareness to the asset management company's efforts to push for gender diversity. And since then, Fearless Girl has certainly evolved for the times. Stephen, maybe you can discuss a little bit some of the new iterations of the statue during the pandemic and in recent months.
Sure. Well, just a little background. When I came to State Street Global Advisors, which hard to believe, 4 years ago, one of the big challenges with the brand was how do we differentiate ourselves from a lot of the other asset managers that essentially sell almost the identical types of strategies that we do. And in our situation, we're the third largest asset manager in the world. We have now around 3.1, depending on what day it is, 3.2 trillion in assets. So we're one of the largest shareholders in the world. And we had a program called Asset Stewardship that essentially allows us to represent shareholders around the globe on all the companies that we invest in. And we're able to influence, if you will, the leadership of those companies. Unlike an active manager, we're mostly an index manager. Therefore, we are buying companies based on an index. So if you take the S&P 500, if you don't like an active manager, if they don't like what a particular company is doing, they can then sell out of it. In our case, you're not going to have the S&P 499 or the S&P 600 announce that it's the 579. Instead, what we do is exert our influence on behalf of shareholders by voting on board resolutions, giving guidance to companies on things that we're going to support, not support. And one of the things that we were trying to do with the Fearless Girl campaign is really influence the composition of publicly traded boards. So when you looked at the S&P 500, back when we started the campaign, a quarter of the S&P 500 did not have a single woman on their board. And going on almost now 4 years this March, every single company on the S&P 500 has at least one woman represented on their board, which is that all due to Fearless Girl campaign? Not necessarily, but we've had a major impact in terms of working with these companies, not with a fist shaking and saying, if you don't do X, Y, Z, we're going to take action, but instead having a constructive conversation around what are the benefits of having a more diverse board? How can you secure long-term investor portfolios by actually embracing diversity? And that has been the beauty of the Fearless Girl campaign, is really being able to have a simple message with a really simple activation, but yet have that enormous emotional connection that everyone identifies with. And so that's been the beauty of that whole campaign.
And in recent months, we've seen Fearless Girl don, a mask. We've seen her honor Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Can you talk about some of those iterations recently and sort of what Fearless Girl, the role of Fearless Girl might be moving forward?
Yeah. So obviously, Fearless Girl's become an iconic symbol for women in leadership, for gender equality globally. It's an internationally recognized symbol. She now faces off the New York Stock Exchange, one of the largest exchanges where a lot of publicly traded companies are traded. And what we wanted to do with Fearless Girl in terms of mask wearing is when children were returning to school, a lot of schools were closing, some were reopening. We're still going through that whole pattern. You and I were talking before this started just about how our kids some are in school, some are out, depending on what's happening. And we felt that a lot of children identify with Fearless Girl, boys and girls, as being an aspiration of of true equality. And we thought this would be one example where if she could encourage children to wear a mask and, if you will, take a small, it's really a small act that has big impact. And Fearless Girl really is a small little statue, that has had enormous impact. So we thought this could be a simple message. With regards to Ruth Bader Ginsburg, one of the whole premises behind Fearless Girl is to support women in senior leadership, both on publicly traded companies, but also women who have had an enormous impact in terms of gender equality. And no one would doubt, no matter which side of the aisle you're on politically, that Ruth Bader Ginsburg had an enormous impact in her 23 years on the Supreme Court in terms of really, really pioneering gender equality. And I think that what we decided to do, interesting enough, the ad that you just showed with the Fearless Girl wearing the mask with the child, that ad was to have run the weekend that Justice Ginsburg passed away. And we mobilized literally within it's hard to believe, a 16-hour period, not even that, 12 hours. And my team worked with our agency, McCann, to say, look, who helped us create the Fearless Girl campaign, how could we pay tribute to Ruth Bader Ginsburg? Because she's such an iconic figure. And once again, the simple things become the most powerful. And in advertising, we're going to show some other work later on that's a little more complex, and it's got a lot more intricate parts playing. But the simplicity here of just having her don the lace collar, which was very iconic in terms of the wardrobe that Ruth Bader Ginsburg wore. She had different collars depending on whether she was riding the majority or the minority view. And we thought this would be a fantastic way to really pay tribute to someone who pioneered gender equality at the highest level of our nation. And I think the outpouring on all political parties and persuasions was evidenced with her passing, and the timeliness by which we could actually insert in a very, I think, non-commercial way. We weren't trying to promote a particular investment strategy. We were not promoting, our capabilities in some unique way. Instead, we were celebrating the life of a very iconic woman leader. And there was a subtleness to it. And I've always tried to do that. My team has tried to do that. Our leadership has tried to do that, where we're not overly commercializing something that we hold quite sacred as a value to our organization. And you've asked about the future. I think Fearless Girl has now, because of her international recognition and the symbolism that she represents, there's some authority behind her and credibility behind her in terms of what does Fearless Girl actually have to say about certain topics. And ESG, you're probably familiar, environmental social
I was
governance.
going to ask you about ESG, if that
Yeah.
was something next on your radar. And, do you give a voice to Fearless Girl?
Well, stay tuned. But we want to be careful, because there's something really beautiful about the simplicity of what Fearless Girl represents, which is, having greater women in leadership. It's particularly greater women leadership on publicly traded boards and at the highest levels of organizations. There's something very simple, direct. It's easy to understand. It doesn't require a lot of translation or mental gymnastics. But I do believe more and more that what we're seeing now and we'll probably talk about it, diversity writ large, that Fearless Girl, while she represents an icon for, gender diversity, I think there's a voice that she could start to represent, maybe not necessarily for people of color, but you got to remember the inspiration behind Fearless Girl was actually, we took a young Latina girl, and we also took a Caucasian girl. So we were trying to reflect that she's She represents the globe. She doesn't represent all races, clearly. But I think there's a role around the social and the governance in ESG that she could start to play. And stay tuned on that front. We're not going to dilute the message, though, with what she represents. But I do believe there's something there. And one of the things that you'll start to see, we're working on a concept called broken ceilings. Broken ceilings, when one woman breaks the glass ceiling, she breaks it for many, many other women that will come. And with the advent of what we've seen with our recent elections, obviously we have the first female woman vice president of the United States, the second highest position in the country. There's a lot of other interesting facts. 135 women were elected to Congress. That's the highest record of women ever elected to Congress. They will represent a quarter of all congressional seats. And we didn't just see the number of women increase in one particular party, it was in both parties. And interestingly enough, there was a big percentage, a significant percentage increase in the Republican Party, which is a real, I think, statement of progress that we're seeing. There's over 787 companies since the inception of the Fearless Girl campaign that have changed their board composition. And as I said earlier, every single company in the S&P 500 now has a woman on their board. So we're really looking at coming up on the 4th year anniversary of what has been the totality of the Fearless Girl impact, and what progress have we made since 2017 in what will be March of 21 on the 4th year anniversary with International Women's Day.
I'm here with Stephen Tisdale, Chief Marketing Officer at State Street Global Advisors. Thanks to those watching at home, we have Elmire, Heather, Meredith, Crystal, Shahir, Claudia, Craig, Maria, and Jeremy. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them and we will try to answer those for you. So Fearless Girl certainly, though, hasn't been without, its own set of controversies, including an ongoing lawsuit with the artist. How has that impacted at all the campaign?
Well, obviously, I'm not going to comment. We have a very good agreement with the artist in terms of our relationship with her, and any matters on litigation, I'm not going to comment on. But in terms of the campaign, I think I've been talking here all along. We are every day almost having to pinch ourselves with how much impact we've been able to have. And there has been controversy. Back when we were conceiving the Fearless Girl campaign, there were many within the State Street organization, and even myself started to have doubts, well, are we the poster child for gender diversity? And I think we all acknowledge as an organization we weren't. And so therefore, what would be the moral platform that we would have and credibility to come out with such a campaign? And I think this is where organizations, particularly when you're looking at brands, you need to kind of stand back and say, either we aspire to be more diverse, we aspire to have even more representation of women in our leadership and people of color, but we're not there yet. And let's be honest, this is a journey. It's a journey we're all on. So does that mean we don't put forward a campaign with what our aspiration should be and how we intend to vote as one of the largest shareholders in the world? And the answer was, let's be transparent. Let's admit that we have our own journey as an organization. We're not here taking the moral high ground and lecturing people. We're on the same journey. We're receiving the same message as Fearless Girl is promoting to all kinds of organizations. And in some respects, it's interesting. The Fearless Girl message resonated and inspired us as an organization to start to embrace change that I don't think would have ever happened had we not done the campaign. So even though there's controversy, the reason why I think it hasn't impacted us or destroyed the campaign is because we never held ourselves up to be something we weren't. We never tried to say we're the moral authority on gender diversity. Instead, we're saying, hey, we have a problem. The world has a problem. Large organizations and publicly traded companies have a challenge here. We're part of that. And what can we do? What are we planning to do to address this?
Yeah,
And that's sorry.
as you alluded to, there were some allegations against the company regarding its own
Yeah,
internal diversity issues. So maybe you can discuss a little bit about what steps that
sure.
the company is taking, what initiatives have been put in place to help rectify some of that.
Yeah. So clearly, when you come out swinging with a campaign like this, and while we got all the accolades and major awards and a lot of media coverage, we also recognized, boy, we're going to have to walk the talk. We're going to have to be incredibly transparent. B, we're going to have to start enacting change. We can't just talk about it. We got to do something. So starting back in 2017, there were goals that were set in terms of increasing the number of women at all levels within the organization, particularly at the senior levels, and also within certain areas of the business. I mean, I'm happy to say marketing, well over 60% of the composition of the entire marketing department are women. But that's not the case in a lot of the other areas of the corporation, in terms of, particularly in the investment side. Although we've just recently announced, and part of this has been part of the plan that we've embraced, is Lori Heil's going to become our first woman chief investment officer as of March, which is the highest position in the investment organization. And so that role has always been, and with our peers, traditionally a position held by a man. And I think what we've tried to do is start to look at our organization, say, okay, let's take each area, let's understand at what levels are we really short, and are falling short, I should say, of having proper representation. And that's now extended beyond gender into racial diversity. And I think we have to embrace a mindset around this, that it's not just being legislatively mandated upon us. Organizations that embrace diversity, I think, unleash a tremendous amount of creativity if they can harness that diversity properly and channel it to create new solutions to problems, to actually open up new markets, to grow the business, to expand the business. And that, to me, is what is exciting about embracing diversity, is how can we use this as a fantastic opportunity, not just to elevate individuals themselves. How do we use this as an opportunity to expand our business and grow it and tap into markets and be unconventional in ways that we historically were never able to do when we had more, monolithic type representation?
So, I mean, outside of Fearless Girl, I do want to talk about some of the other creative that you've released amid the pandemic and things that you have upcoming. How, if at all, has State Street pivoted in its strategy?
Yeah, so it's been an interesting 8-9 months for you and everybody else. So a couple things. One, I think the biggest pivot that we made, and I'm noticing a lot of brands, particularly in the B2B space, is we've had to shift from, hey, here's what's great about us, here's what our capabilities are, here's what our competitive advantage is, here's the new seductive way that you can engage with us. And instead, what we did and what our clients wanted to hear was, we don't want any varnish, we don't want any packaging. What we're interested in is, how are you managing our money? What decisions are you making on a daily basis in light of this pandemic? What are the insights that you're prepared to share with us? Can you be very candid and transparent with us about what indicators you're seeing in the market, and how you intend to respond, and what should I be doing as an investor? And so we started to mobilize rapid communications. And when you have rapid communications, there's no time for dressing it up. There's not a lot of time for packaging it, making it look beautiful. It was really very using video, getting our investment professionals, our portfolio strategists, our portfolio managers, our chief investment officers, literally giving them using their phone and just recording without being scripted. Here's what we're seeing the markets do. Here's what's keeping us awake at night. Here's the type of changes we're making, and getting that out as fast as we could to our clients. And there was something refreshing about that. People hate to be marketed to. I don't think you want to be marketed to, and neither do I. What people want is they want the truth. They want transparency, and they want to know, can you help me make a better decision with what I need to do with our portfolio? Or can you help me understand why you're making the decisions? And do I have confidence that you're making the right decisions? And that was what completely consumed us, starting with the lockdown in March, that initially happened.
And what's worked so far and what hasn't?
So what's worked is that very simple, direct, almost, I hate to say, old-fashioned way of communicating. Emails without all the clever prose, very straight, direct. Here's what we're doing. Here's what we saw. Here's some errors, or not errors, but here's conclusions we made last week or last month. And here's how we're course correcting, because we now have new data. We now have new insight. And so that worked really well, using video, but not in a super packaged way, just very direct, almost in an authentic way, because there was something about being credible in the market. People, I think, especially going into the election, were feeling that they couldn't trust regular news organizations. There was always some kind of bias inherent in the news networks. And what people were wanting is just let me decide for myself, but give me facts. I want facts. I'm not just wanting opinion. I'm wanting facts. I'm wanting genuine insights. And that's what worked. I think what didn't work was when we kind of stepped away and went back to kind of conventional, before the pandemic. A lot of it was paying attention to how clever the packaging was, or the engagement, or the experience, and putting a lot of effort, because that's where competitive advantage is. You're vying for people's attention. So how do you grab their attention? And I think, when it came to communicating what we were doing, how we were doing, people weren't interested in that. And I think they kind of had, there was a healthy cynicism. And instead, we just needed to be very simple, direct, and transparent.
What might all of this mean? Any lessons or takeaways for what marketing might look like in the new year?
So I honestly think in the B2B space, what you're going to see is the movement away from conventional campaigns as we've known, and be instead, I think, positioning your brands and your offer as being an alternative source of news and an alternative source of facts that people can trust. So people want the truth. People want to have insights that they can digest and make their own opinions. And I think the future, particularly in the B2B space, is really going to be those brands that can provide that information, because people are not necessarily getting it in the big publications. What they're wanting to know is just give me facts and allow me to make educated decisions. And I think the brands that do that really well in the most authentic way possible, without being pushing or flogging their product, are going to be the winners. And that, to me, is what the change is going to be going in the B2B space, at least.
I think we have a new piece of creative, or an upcoming piece of creative from State Street that we can show.
Yep.
Get in and out with the liquidity leaders. Get DIA, the only ETF that tracks it down.
So this hasn't been released yet, or this is coming up soon?
I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you now.
I can't hear you. I don't know why.
So maybe tell us a little bit of that creative.
But I'm going to talk anyways. I can't hear you, and I'm not sure whether I hit. Hang on one second here. Let's see if we can get this working.
We can hear you just fine.
Sadly, I can't hear you. But if you can hear me, give me a thumbs up if you do.
I can hear you.
Okay.
I hear you.
So I'm just going to talk a little bit about that campaign because I think probably you're wanting to know where are we going and what in the heck has that ad got to do with anything that I've just said. So here's the interesting part. There's been an obsession in the asset management space around fees. Everyone is, talking about they have got the lowest cost to offer, and it's really kind of a commodity, campaign and advertisement to talk about fees. The thing that is not talked about in any great depth has been liquidity, which is your ability to get in and out of an investment strategy. And this has, in some respects, much more ramifications in terms of cost to an investor than just fees. And what we've tried to do is say, boy, you need to think, especially as we go into volatile markets, are you able to get in and out? Can you get out quickly without having huge spreads that typically happen on funds that are not as liquid? And it's something that we are educating investors on. And so here, what we're doing is taking an everyday life scenario about someone that, someone's driving a car and they're easily distracted. It could be, they're distracted by someone driving by, and they're going to be now in hot pursuit, only to realize that they can't actually do it because they're stuck in the mud. And that's an awful situation to get into. So we're taking everyday life experiences and somehow using that to start a conversation with investors about the importance of liquidity. So that's a good example of one of the innovative ways and very unconventional ways that we're promoting something that we feel is incredibly important for investors as they make decisions going forward into what will be very volatile markets in light of this pandemic and other global issues that we're facing.
Can you hear me, Stephen?
And I can't. Maybe what you do is you type in the chat, and that way I can get your question. I'm not sure what happened.
Yes, we are taking a look at.
I can't hear you, but maybe you could just type the question in the chat box.
Yeah, so we typed the question is, my next question is,
the creative is going to debut. Just one second, go back here. Oops.
Oh, did we lose you, Stephen?
Here.
Did
I lose you?
No, we have Stephen. He's going to tell us when.
The creative's going to actually debut in the new year. And there we are. I apologize. I don't know what's happened here. But we're going to be releasing that ad starting in the first quarter. And so we're pretty excited about it. And I think you'll start to see also some other ads that we're going to talk about in our last minute if we have a moment.
I think that's all the time that we have for today. So we're going to wrap up, but thank you so much, Stephen, for joining us. We really appreciate it, and thank you for showing us some new creative we can expect in 2021. Thank you, as always, to our Ad Age crew, Alfred Mascaroni, Anna Sakula, Max Sternlicht, and Elise Liffring for making this live stream happen. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. For more episodes of Ad Age Remotely, you can go to adage.com/remotely. See you soon.